So we are discussing about sessions, and we saw that sessions are useful in many ways. Sessions are basically a way we can store variables on server side to maintain state of the users, and we can use them in different ways. We saw that we can store the form data. We also discussed we can store them to identify members from non-members of a certain web store. And once we know that they are member, we can authenticate after login. We can store their values like name, user ID, and access level, what they can do in session variables, and we can record what they have done well after they login. And and the data we should capture can be used for different purposes. Okay. Sessions are a good way to maintain state of application, and they also can be used for maintaining security of a web application. For example, we know that login, once the user authenticated, whatever the our user ID, username we want to keep as a session variable, we will use that to authenticate the user on each and every page of a website that is a legitimate user. And if the user is not legitimate, at the time of login, we basically redirect it to a proper message to login, otherwise register with the website. In ASP.NET, there are controls which you can configure for login functionality. And in order to configure them, you definitely need to study about them. What are their attributes? What files do you need to change, and what attributes you need to change in order to configure according to your application. But ASP.NET has login control. Especially if you create a project, you see there's a account folder over there. Okay. But you can create your own login as well. And the simple logic is basically we also use it for login password, and then we basically query the database against those values. And if the record is being returned, we consider that as authentic user, and we allow that user to access the member's private area. Otherwise, we redirect it to the login page again. And I can show you now one of the example, which is login page. This is basically this one, web application 1 rod, which is 2 ways to implement the login page. In order to unzip, you basically use WinRAR software if unzip is not working. Anyhow, so let me show you this application. So in this case, what I had before basically is login form 1, in which we use this login control to configure this control. For example, I just drop this control on this form, and then I configure it that I will specify a SQL statement, and I basically wrote this statement, and in this statement basically expect values of these variables. Okay, and if I click next, this interface allows me how these variables will be given a value. For example, name, we can select the name variable. From here we can identify, is it a form, is it a query string. Basically it's a control. From control we want to assign the value, and when we select controls, all controls will be available over here. So against name I select text box 1, and it will come over here. That text box 1 value will be assigned to the name. Okay. Similarly, we can set it for the password, and then you can go and finish it, and it will basically configure the control. If you go in the code behind, you can see that there is a SQL statement over there, and these are the command parameters. Okay. And if you run this web application, you enter the value and submit the form, those values of the control will basically will be available behind the code. And what code I have written over here, I access the service SQL data source 1, which is the name of this control. Okay, so this is the SQL data source 1, and I'm accessing this in code behind, and I am referring to a select statement which I specified using graphical user interface, and I say that whatever arguments are given by default, use those arguments. I'm not providing any new arguments, so the arguments is empty. Okay, and the return, basically the query will execute and it will return a row, okay, and I'm casting that to a data view. Data view can contain multiple tables, okay, so that one row would be represented as a table, okay, and I use that data view, and I just use one if, that if data count is 0, there is no more table. It means the query did not return any value in the data view because there is no data table, then return it to the login page. Otherwise, retrieve the value from the table which is on index 0, and the row, this basically again refers to the first row of that table, and the value which will be returned will be username, and I assign that value to the user key. So this is basically using the graphical user interface component, which is server control, to do the logic. I have created another page which is a simple page in which I have 2 fields and button only, and when this button is clicked, I have this code behind SQL query, and this is the same page which we did for workshop 4 and workshop 5. In this we are not using those ASP.NET controls. So I have created SQL connection, new SQL connection, and I can pass the query string, the connection string, the way we did in week 4 and week 5 labs. But over here I use the existing connection string, which is login connection, and this connection string is used in login page 1. And if you go to web config file, especially when I drop the control on login page 1, this connection string was created and stored in web application, so that we don't need to create this connection string again and again, so we can reuse it. So in web page 2 code behind, I'm reusing that string, and I wrote this SQL statement. I'm passing the command parameters which we were doing through interface in the page 1, and I created a reader. I opened the connection, I executed the reader, then I basically checked reader.read whether there is a record. If there is a record, I basically retrieve the record, create session variables, and redirect to user to admin page. For example, admin page would contain certain links, okay, that the user can do, or I can redirect it to if it is not a legitimate user, I can redirect it to login page. And in your assessment, you have access rights, whether it's admin or it's a manager, and you can identify using the values 0 and 1. So you can have another if it is admin, you can direct it to admin page. If it is a manager, you can redirect it to the manager page. And on default page, which is you can consider of admin, here's the default page. Okay. On default page code behind, I have this code that if user session is not there, redirect user to login page. Otherwise, display this session key that welcome user over here. Okay, so this is uses of session variables.
So in other words, every time I do put the wrong information, it will just reset the code.
Yeah. So if user is not went to login page, it knows the URL that the member area is default.aspx, and he directly type in default.aspx. Session will not be there. Session will be null. So it will be redirected to login page. If he comes through login page, then there will be session value. It will not be null. So it will be able to access the page, and this message will be displayed. Okay. So this is about login functionality, and you can use either of one. You can follow either of one for your assessment too.
But you see, you select user authorization when you create the program.
Yeah. It does. Yeah.
Hundreds of lines.
But you stuck somewhere when you are trying to modify something. Yeah. But do share your problem with me so that I will be in the loop that you are struggling, you did this, so that during evaluation I will take into account your efforts. Okay, so do email me whenever you get stuck. Whether I will provide you a solution or not, but I will keep record.
That's the last part.
Okay, so sessions are useful for security reasons as well, and login. I show you example. Similarly, how much values you can store in sessions. For example, we retrieve data from the database, and we can store student ID, some courses which student you have taken in as a session variable. So when user login, we can create 8 session variables, 10, 20, 30, just to make our application logic easy. We don't need to write too many queries to retrieve category ID first and then category name. I can save category name in the session variable, so that whenever category name is there, I don't need to search it again. So this trade-off, how much variables you create as a session variables, or again, when you create so many session variables, it affects your performance. So on one side you have performance, on the other side you have business logic. You can make session variables to simplify your business logic, but it will affect your performance. So you have to identify the trade-off, keeping in this security feature as well. So we can use security to track the person what they are doing, so that we can identify legitimate access from unlimited unauthorized access. And what we can do is we can basically save these values as a session variable, like web page name, the time they visited, time spent on this. So we are tracking the activity to identify abnormal patterns. And in cybersecurity, all the intrusion detection systems, they do this. They can look at the logs, they look at the click streams. Click stream basically how users, how many times they have clicked on certain items. So you are capturing their pattern of traversing the website. Okay, how much time they spend on one page, which link they have clicked, and so on. So when you do this, in order to improve your overall working of your web application, for example, what is the overall load, which pages are being visited most by the user, then you track this information of users, which is called click streams. Now click streams are anonymous. We don't record identity of a person. We just capture their navigation patterns and so on, the items they click, how many users have clicked certain items and so on. And they are different from web logs. Web logs are for different purposes. Okay, over there maybe we need to capture identity of a user, which user executed delete from the table, and so that if something important information has been deleted, we can account for that activity. Okay, so click stream are different from web logs. So why we need this click stream data? To optimize the navigation. Okay, if user are going to some specific item and they have to click 5 times, and there are thousands of users who are clicking 5 times to reach that item, why not they make that item as a one link on the top front page and so on. So it optimizes your navigation, how the navigation you can think of to regroup the submenu and so on. Most common items you can identify, on which people are spending more. So all of these things you can identify, that the eBay, the ads they send to you, again they are looking at the clickstream data, and then accordingly they identify what users are mostly looking at, and they can recommend it to you as well. So besides capturing this information on a server side, cookies are basically small as a file that is stored on the client browser that saves some information, and that could be information like a session. It's like a session, but it's on the client side, that okay, when user exit our website, the link was this one, so that when user come to the website, we can read from the cookie and show the same page to the user. So cookies can also be used in order to capture the relevant information. Over here you can see we are improving what you can say user experience by looking at this click stream data. We can use this user profiling, we can categorize them and so on. So it's not only e-commerce, in education. For example, in Blackboard, which is, to be honest, not quite intuitive in order to generate these reports, but such tools can be used to basically track your activities. If you send me an email that okay, I'm not able to do this assessment, I don't know what this request object is, give me some information. I will say, come on, I will go and look at whether the user has clicked the tutorial or not, whether he has done the workshop or not, whether he has attended the lecture or not. So through that I can identify, oh, this user never came to the never accessed the Blackboard website. So I can ask him that look at access the website. So I guide him in a better way, rather than giving answer of request. The problem lies somewhere else. Okay. So for staff, many insights can be generated. For students, again, you can look at your profiles and you can identify areas to improve and so on. So we do analysis of clickstream. There are many methods: machine learning, statistical analysis that can help you to predict something and so on. So through charts, graphs, and numerical calculations, site administrators can identify what you can do. Staff can identify how to better guide students, and students can identify how they can better make use of this website. Now, clickstream data can also be used for auditing. Okay, but for auditing we need to go one step further. We may need to identify the identity of a user and what they have done. Okay, so in auditing it records further information. For example, how many successful login attempts were made by this user, and all of a sudden next day the user is trying to log in and he made 10 attempts. So that's a abnormal pattern. And for auditing we can identify that, okay, was it that attempt made to premises? If yes, then how that person were able to access the premises. Maybe the guy gave his card to some friend and so on. So we need to capture this information that can help us to do the auditing. So these are some pieces of information we need to store: at what time, IP address, what events it did, how many time log out, and so on. So in those logs we need to capture IP so that we can backtrack them, and we can protect ourselves from cyber attacks and any frauds and so on. So you can go through details of these things. So basically it's more about protection. And in case of password, if we can, important thing is if there is an abnormal pattern, how you are going to handle it. Okay, you know that abnormal pattern would happen. For example, in case of login, we know someone tried to log in using certain software. Maybe generate random passwords and try to log in. What is the policy? How you basically handle that? Do you have trial limits? How many trial limits you would implement? And then when user is doing it, you keep recording it. Okay, 3 attempts are made. What sort of username and password were used? And that can help you to tell whether it was a user attempt or whether it was some spam software. Okay. And does attempts basically, do you allow multiple logins from remote machines? I can log into ECU from over here, and maybe I give my details to my brother. He log in into the system as well. Do you allow concurrent access of a user from 2 remote locations or not? And if you don't allow it, how you control it? That when someone logins from the other location, he would be given a message, you are already logged in. For that you have to basically implement certain functionality. I mentioned to you singleton pattern is one way to implement this functionality. That only one instance of that object will be created, no matter from where access is being made. So similarly for business logic, for databases are asset for organization. As I mentioned, I emphasized it before in the last lecture. We have to create logs, even logs for them as well. Who did at what time, what sort of information that, what sort of information is related, and objective is auditing. And the logs we are generating, they should provide us that information. Now the question is, how much information we should store? Okay, if you store too much information, then again you are compromising on performance of your web application, because on every click you are recording the information, and if there are 1,000 number of users, then definitely it's a great deal of information you are generating. But if you don't capture anything, you cannot do the auditing. So you have to identify what is the best balance that can help you to do the auditing as best as you can. So on one side is auditing you need to do, and second side how much you compromise on performance of web application. So objective is the administrator should get enough information to move forward. If it is some incident happened, some attempt has been made to hack into your system, he can identify, okay, something has happened, what I need to do immediately. Once immediately stuff has been done, okay, now what do we need to improve our systems, policies and so on. So this is what is required by an administrator. For example, if people are trying to log into the system, keep failing, then we need to record it, and that will help us to either help the user if maybe it's a legitimate user trying to do it. So this is not about finger pointing. Okay, the information we are capturing, especially in organization, and especially in organization, you need to inform the user that that this sort of information we will be capturing. Okay, so this is not about finger pointing. This is more about making good experience for the user, keeping security into context, making database reliable, consistent. It's making sure it's available. So this is all the objective. That's why we are basically doing this auditing and capturing the information that can help the admins to keep the system running, and they can better plan for maintenance and creating backups when they know what is the behavior pattern by looking at this clickstream auditing information. Who does the auditing? Again, can users see their own logs? Again, these are the things which come into organization policies. Most of the time, users should not be allowed to look at logs unless it's something task list, which may be created as a log. But for auditing purposes, they should not be able to see what they are doing. Okay, admins can see the log. So we need to take into account a privacy issue because we're capturing some maybe personal information. Auditing policy, who can do what? Again, the organization should have well-defined policies, step-by-step procedures, how to capture the information and how to use it. So an application without auditing is like a bank without logs. Okay, so this example tells very clearly that you need these things. But challenge is up to what extent you need to go. Performance versus information generation. Yep. So session management is critical, especially when we talk about handling state of the application, and they help building applications that especially where business logic is distributed on multiple pages. And sessions provide a very easy way to transfer the information from one page to another page. But you have to take into account the trade-off associated with this way of handling the form data. And sessions are crucial for security management, user management, and site analysis management. Especially we discuss click streams and auditing. So that's it. Do you have any question regarding what we have covered so far? I can show you the second application, which is I have showed you the login one, and this is the data grid. And in today's lab, you will basically be playing with the data grid. Okay. And you will be implementing the functionality how to edit the items in a data grid. In this example, let me run it for you. If you are using data grid to add information, then how you can do it. For example, this is again the category name and description. And if you see at the bottom of this grid, I have one button and two text fields. Okay. And in this I can add a category name, for example test. I can add a category description, and I can submit this button, and I basically added information into the database, and it is being displayed over here again. So I'm using the same control grid. I'm not using form view. I'm not using separate text field on the top of the form to grid. What I did, I use the grid control, customize it so that I can have these two fields and I can add information. Okay.
Are you then just refreshing the same page?
Sorry?
It's the same page.
This is the same page, a postback. The same page. So let me show you how I implemented it. So this is a data grid, this is data source, and after configuring the data source has been assigned to data grid, and you will do edit columns in today's lab. What I'm going to show you is edit templates. Let me show you let me close this one. If you go and look at the source, you will see that because I already have created edit items and template items over here. In each grid, we can have different templates. Okay, edit template in a grid shows that in edit mode how information would be displayed or what control would be displayed. So this section basically shows me that information, that whenever this edit will be ended in edit form on this column, which is category ID. So these are within certain columns. You can see that this is category ID, this is category name, and then so on. So within this column, when this grid is in edit mode, label will be displayed. Item template is is view, you can say by default view of a data grid. So it will show whatever you want to show on first instance. So it's when I run that page, you will see that there was category name, ID and category name. So when this page is run, data grid control will be initialized. It will show the category ID from the database. Okay, and it has a footer template as well. That what you want in a footer of this data grid. So you can see that with data grid control we can customize it, and there are different templates like item templates, edit item templates, and footer item template. So without going to the backend interface, we have this smart gadget over here. So in order to do something with the templates, we have edit templates items over here, and this is how it gets open. And in today's lab you will basically play with edit item templates. Now you can see over here, against each column I have options to manipulate those templates. So in this case, against category ID 1, in footer template I have a button. I can add and drop more controls over here which I want to show in this footer. Okay, so I have a button over here in this footer template. If I go to category name footer, I have a text field over there. Okay, if I go to third column, which is description, in that I have another text field. Okay, now let me go to the first template, category ID and footer, where I have a button, and if I click this button, it takes me to this logic. When that button is clicked, I have to capture the value from those text fields and add the value into database. Okay, so this code basically first of all captures the value from the text box which is in the category name column. So the name of the text box I gave is category name. So I find that control by using grid footer row. So grid view is the name of that grid, and that grid basically have a footer. So I'm capturing the footer row, and from footer row I'm finding a control which is category name, and after capturing that control I am retrieving the text value, and I am basically so this is text box costing. Okay, so I'm doing costing of that value into text box, because when control is retrieved it is in object form. I have to cost into the text box. Okay, and after it being costed to text box, I am using this text property to retrieve the value. So I'm retrieving category name, category description. I have SQL data source, and this is another way you can insert the parameter into the query. Okay, the query is again within the data grid, because data grid is retrieving the information, and we have defined queries in SQL data source control. So I'm inserting parameters to add the value, both category name, description, and then I call this method of SQL data source dot insert. Insert query will be executed. Okay, so look at this code, and if you decided to use grids in your assessment tool, you can follow this approach. Previously I have there were a few examples uploaded using the form view. You can use the form view to do all this activity as well. So it's your choice which controls you want to use in order to do your assessment. So do you have any question regarding these examples? No? Everything is good? Excellent. Okay, then I will see you in the lab. Thank you very much.